So this here is part 2 of how we broke the 3rd Gen Tacoma and the 4th Gen Tacoma on a local trail here in Colorado. This video is going to cover what happened and what we repaired and how we got it back to running again. So let's start with the 3rd Gen Tacoma just because that's the vehicle that we finished on the last video. So if you haven't checked out that video, go check it out and then come back to this one. So the part that basically exploded is right in here. So this part right here, this is called the spindle. It extends from the lower control arm ball joint all the way up to the upper control arm ball joint. So in between here, right where the CV axle goes into, inside there, there's a hub with a wheel bearing. That wheel bearing basically exploded. So on the trail, that driver's side CV axle was the one that snapped, but then the wheel bearing on this side was the one that gave out. And then when it gave out, it allowed it to move so much that when you're driving, it's just basically doing this. And what that caused is the bearings were just falling out. It caused the rotors to be at a weird angle. So the pads were contacting the rotors at a strange angle, causing that rotor to be destroyed. And then the tie rod was also bent because it allowed so much movement that caused the tie rod to bend. So we had to replace that. We also had to replace the ABS sensor as well. And that is not a cheap piece. Little tiny piece that big cost $330 to replace. And that's just this side. So that wheel bearing caused the wheel speed sensor to go out because of the damage, which is because it actually contacted with the CV. And then the tie rod went out. And then obviously the wheel bearing had to be replaced. But while we were in here, we also replaced the up control arm with the new SVC that just came out. That one is no longer a serviceable ball joint, fully sealed. All the grease that they use now is a newer, has newer technology or whatever chemicals in there to prolong the failure of the up control arm. SVC has a 3-year warranty, so if you do have to replace that, it's a 3 years instead of just a 1 year like most other companies. But all that there was caused by one wheel bearing. So if you feel something as your tires are rotating, check the wheel bearing because within the next 5 to 10 miles, that could cause thousands of dollars of damage. And that includes the tie rods, inner and outer, CV axle, wheel speed sensor, potentially could be bending your spindles, causing your rotors and pads to go out as well. So, and then not to mention the labor that's going to cost to repair all that. So if you hear anything, get it checked out, wheel bearing. And if you're doing the wheel bearing, make sure you're doing both sides because we only did the one side on Peter's truck just because there was a lot of expense already going into it. But then within the next month, we went down to Uray with this truck, and the driver's side wheel bearing started to go out as we were coming down from a trail. And Peter knew exactly what that feeling was. So we pulled over, and luckily we caught it just in time. We went to the auto parts store and got basically the whole assembly instead of just a bearing because it was a Friday night and Toyota wasn't open. Plus, we didn't have the wheel press to press that in. So we got the whole wheel hub assembly as one unit, and we're able to repair that on the side of the road. But take my word, pro tip, if you are doing the wheel bearing on one side, and if you feel that start to give, pull over right away, get it towed to your house. We get it towed to a shop that can repair it like ours. That way, you're not gonna cause other damages here. That's gonna cost you up to like 1,000 to or even more with installation labor. So if you feel that, make sure you get that checked out right away. So the last thing we did to Peter's truck was just throw 35-inch tires on, so that way we can take this truck back to that trail that it broke on and conquer that. But now that we talked about that, let's talk about what we did to fix the 24 Tacoma. So what we're going to talk about first is the rear end because that's what failed initially first. So back here, we have a solid axle, just like the 3rd Gen Tacoma. The only difference is that once we had the diff open, we saw the gears that are in there and we saw the axles that snapped. So if you have been following us on Instagram, we showed that the rear axle snapped, and then we'll talk about the front in just a little bit. But the passenger side rear axle snapped clean off. And what happened there is that looks like from the TFL video that they interviewed the chief engineer at Toyota. That part is designed to fail right there. So it snapped clean off. And what we did is we just pulled it out and replaced it. We got a brand new one from Toyota. And in our last video, we talked about bringing it to Toyota to have them fix it potentially under warranty. But when we brought it over there, they basically said due to the tires, the lift, and all the stuff that we have on it, chances are it's going to be very slim that Toyota actually will cover it. So we just took it into our own hands, brought it back to the shop, and we took everything apart and got that repaired. So this here is the passenger side rear axle that snapped. So if you look right here, there's no splines on it anymore. That is because this is it right here. So you can see there almost a perfect split. So this goes about here, and that connects to the diff, the rear diff in there. And normally this is lubricated with gear oil so that it keeps it nice and cool when it's spinning, and everything like that. So this is the fill part here. So you can see right here, it gets a little bit slimmer. It goes from this kind of, it's slight, but it's definitely skinnier here than it is in here. So according to Toyota, this is designed to fail like this, but the rear is not as bad as the front. The rear, you can actually just take off your wheels, take off all your brake components, slide this guy out, replace this part. So not as bad, but in the front, you actually have to disassemble the carrier itself because the part that failed is in the center of the diff. All right, now that we've told you guys what failed, we're going to talk a little bit about how it failed. So if you've been watching my channel or our channel for some time now, we've gotten to a point where we're pretty comfortable off-road, where if something breaks, it breaks. It is what it is. And I've gotten to a point where when I go wheeling, I'm pretty reckless. So I tend to do things that you really shouldn't be doing, as far as like using a winch instead of trying to just pull somebody uphill, especially with the vehicle behind you being heavier than you, and having the wheel hop like that. That is how this axle snapped. So when the tire hops, especially in for low, if your tires move and it's rotating and it's not hopping, that's fine. However, when it starts hopping and it goes up in the air and you got all that momentum and it comes back down, it basically just puts all that force into these axles and just twists it completely off. And that's exactly what happened here. So this was completely my fault. The front is my fault as well. But let's go ahead and go talk about that. Now we're going to talk about the front and explain kind of what happened. So same exact thing. Since we lost all the traction in the rear, so we were still trying to go up the hill in the video, all the power and all the load was in the front. And then once it started hopping, same thing. Since everything is all in the front now, once we started hopping, the same thing happened, and this part failed here. So this here is the intermediate center shaft that is in the front diff carrier. This twisted completely off. As you can see here, it's a pretty clean cut. This happened to the TFL trucks, or 2024 Toyota Tacoma truck as well. The same exact part failed on their vehicle. And according to the chief engineer, this is supposed to fail, designed to fail. However, getting to this is not as easy as replacing your just CV axles. This is in the center. So you got to disassemble the axles. You got to take the front diff out, open it up, and then this guy sits in the middle of that. So getting to this is definitely not easier than just pulling your CV axles and replacing the CV axle. It is a much cheaper part, but for the amount of labor you have to put into it to get to this part, in my opinion, is not worth it to make this a weaker point and to be the failure point instead of just a standard CV axles. Again, it is cheaper, but the labor to get to it is not worth it, in my opinion. So, on top of that, we repaired this, replaced it with a new one, get the CV axle in the rear. We got a new one in there as well. And while we were in the diff, I guess the diffs, the front and the rear, what we did too is we re-geared it. So this Tacoma here is the first 2024 Tacoma to do a re-gear as far as we know of. So if somebody out there did it, we don't know of it. And Revolution Gear, which is the gears that we put in here, they don't know anybody else that have done it. We actually had to figure it out because the diff that is in this vehicle and compared to the third gen is different. This is actually a smaller diff, which is kind of a disappointment in my opinion, because I assume everything newer moving forward would be bigger and better. But obviously we got a smaller engine. We got the 4-cylinder turbo instead of the V6. And then we have a smaller diff as well. So in the clip that I'll put up on the screen here, you'll see on the left side, you have a diff from third gen Tacoma. That will include the ring and pinion gear and the locker and everything. So that's off of a third gen Tier D off-road. The one on the right will be from this one, the fourth gen 2024 and 2025 non-hybrid Tacoma with the Tier D off-road package. And it's a lot smaller than the third gen, which is, you know, obviously not good. But I'm sure Toyota had a reason for it, whether that be because of the smaller engine, you get a smaller diff, whatever that is, that's what we got. But while we were in there, we went ahead and replaced the gears that come on the truck. So factory gears is 3.58, I believe, and we went to a 488 to accommodate for the 37-inch tires, the weight that we have on this vehicle, and mainly for the tires, just because they are way bigger than the factory size, and we wanted to reduce the or lower the amount of power that we need to turn these wheels. So going with the 488 gears, we actually have a little more low-end torque, so turning these is a lot easier. And then you really feel it on the highway. So when we were going up the I-70 passes, going 75, you can really feel the gears putting in work, because it's a lot easier to get the vehicle rolling uphill than it was beforehand with the factory gears. So that was a huge plus. So that is pretty much everything we found out about the 2024 Tacoma. Smaller diff, rear diff has a locker if you have the TRD off-road. The front diff is pretty tight, so I'm not sure if you can fit a front locker in there. We were gonna try, but it was so tight in there that we didn't even bother. But if you do want to, we could definitely get your vehicle in here and see if you want to try and fit a front locker in there for you and get it re-geared as well. And we're currently going to run a promo, and we're going to run it for a little bit, probably the rest of the summer for this year. But check the description and give us a call. If we are still running the promo, we'll definitely give it to you. It's going to be $450 off the entire deal. So if you purchase the gears and have it installed with us, we'll take $450 off your entire installation package. So it's going to be a limited time. So check the description. We're going to have either like we're still running this sale, give us a call, we'll get you booked in, or the sale has ended and we're no longer running the deal. So check that out. But it's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you guys in another video.